It's the age of nostalgia right now. And honestly, it's making me feel really, really old. People want to go back to the time before the internet, when things were simpler, when you had to actually put in effort to get a result, when you had to wait for your favorite TV show instead of streaming it with a click of a button. And there's a real romanticization of everything pre 2000s happening right now. And there's a group of influencers who believe that the 1950s were the be all and end all, which is, understandable, I guess. But when some of these women are advocating for submission to husbands, calling for contraception to be banned, arguing that only boys should be educated because women belong in the kitchen, how did that become such a massive movement in our age, in our time? How could something so extreme and so restrictive land so perfectly with so many people? Today on Why It Resonates, Tradwives. Welcome to Why It Resonates with me, Lem Zakaria, or Lema Zakaria, who's slightly sick. I hope you forgive my voice. And my curiosity drives me to spend hours researching topics and trends without even getting paid for it. But apparently you're enjoying it, so here we are. So the show is about why some ideas, trends, and phenomena resonate and why others completely miss through the lens of psychology, storytelling, and marketing. And, I'd heard of Tradwives before. I didn't really think much of it. I wrote it off as some niche internet thing. But it turns out that it's massive and multi-layered. It's political, it's performative, and from my research, it's a bit scary, to be honest. And quick definition so we're on the same page. A tradwife is short for traditional wife, is a married woman who embraces traditional gender roles, such as homemaking, raising children, cooking, cleaning, serving her husband, all while looking beautiful, of course. And the term is mostly used for younger women who chose this lifestyle and obviously choose to share it on social media. Now, my mom would technically fit into that description, if I were to be honest, though not by choice. She was forced to leave her job when her boss found out that she was getting married, because obviously her focus should be on her husband and her children. So I grew up with a mom who was fully dedicated to the household. And only now that I actually have my own kids do I truly understand and respect what this sacrifice meant. But this movement goes beyond a woman choosing a lifestyle like my mom did, or in her situation, it was a little bit forced on her. In some ways, this movement is genuinely dangerous. So how did it come about? How did it turn into such an extreme ideology? Yalla, we're diving in.
Let's set the scene.
To trace the roots of this, we have to go back to 1950s America, where strict gender roles were not actually the trend, they were the way things were. And after World War II, popular culture pushed hard for women to return to domesticity. You had it in magazines, TV shows, advertisements. Everywhere you looked, there was an image of the happy housewife. Women were told that marriage was the most important thing that they could accomplish. And the problem is that a lot of these housewives were miserable, and that widespread disillusionment eventually sparked a second wave feminism, ignited in part by Betty Friedan's The Feminine Mystique. Fast forward to 2010s, and that same ideology started resurfacing online. That 1950s one, I mean. The key early figure here isn't actually somebody that you would expect. Her name is Alina Kate Pettit, I'm not sure. She's not American, she's British. She started in the late 2000s. She started by posting about being a stay-at-home girlfriend on her own blog. It was called Mrs. Stefford. And in 2016, she launched the Darling Academy, which is a website that became widely read internationally. And legacy media actually picked it up. She wrote 2 books, she appeared on the BBC, and she became that poster woman for the tradwife movement before anyone had even heard of Nara Smith or Ballerina Farm. Her argument, to be fair, back then was quite nuanced. She believed homemaking was a skilled, serious career choice that deserved to be celebrated. She rejected the girl boss ideal that she always felt pressured to live up to, and she positioned the tradwife lifestyle as almost like a counter-cultural antidote to the exhaustion of this rat race that we're still living in. She even framed it through a feminist lens. Her argument was that feminists should mean women can choose whatever they want for their own lives, including being a housewife. But since then, since she's put these books out and made this massive ripple effect, She's actually stepped back. There was massive backlash, and she's since distanced herself from that movement she helped create. And basically, she said that the online tradwife world is not a true representation of the human experience or a housewife for that matter. That's within her own words. Guess where she lives now? She lives in Sydney, Australia, where I live. And she literally lit that fire and ran. And honestly, I can't think of a better place to disappear to than Australia.
So what's the impact?
Things really started moving in 2018, and like so many niche ideologies that break into the mainstream, you know who was the culprit? The gateway was Reddit, specifically through the anti-feminist thread called Red Pill. From Reddit, it moved to Instagram, which makes complete sense since Instagram at the time was the most aesthetically performative platform out there. And, the look was everything, so it matched that platform perfectly. But COVID is when it really, truly blew up. In lockdown, isolated and exhausted, people found tradwife content oddly soothing. The slow mornings, the homemade bread, the quiet domesticity. It was basically the opposite of the chaos that was happening outside when no one knew what the hell was going to happen. And by 2023, it was fully mainstream on TikTok. Influencers like Hannah Nealman, known as Ballerina Farm, and Nara Smith, they've got something like 11.5 million followers, over 630 million likes, and they brought that movement to an enormous audience. Even in 2025, the Cambridge English Dictionary officially added the word tradwife into the dictionary. And as of now, the hashtag tradwife is averaging 1.1 billion views a month on TikTok alone. So suddenly we're starting to have these gender roles debates at a scale that hadn't happened in decades. Should women stay at home while men work? Isn't there an inherent difference between men and women when it comes to their roles in society? Honestly, I'm getting nauseous just asking those questions. For context, I'm in like a 2-mom household with kids, so I am, by definition, the antithesis of this movement.
So why did it resonate?
Here's my read, and I want to be clear about this because I think it gets missed in most conversations about tradwives. The movement actually didn't really take off because women wanted to be subservient. It actually took off because women were exhausted with the expectations that were placed on them. And this content was the first thing in a long time that told them it was okay to step back from those expectations. That's it. That's why it resonated. Everything else flows from there. So think about what the dominant message to women was in the mid-2010s, right? Have it all. Career, family, perfect body, fulfilling relationship. And not just have it all, want it all. So wanting less than that was a failure of ambition. That's how it was seen socially. And we know about the girl boss, era. That ideal said that women's liberation meant getting the corner office, breaking the glass ceiling, hustling harder. And when the identity eventually cracked under the weight of its own contradictions, because it was exhausting and unrealistic to expect all of that from women, that gap between the promise and the reality was enormous. And nothing came to replace that gap until tradwife content walked into that vacuum and said, what if you didn't want all of that? What if you didn't want that corner office? What if you didn't want all of this ambition that you're meant to want? That's permission. And permission, when you're running on empty, feels like oxygen. It validated women who had been invisible for years, the ones who genuinely loved homemaking, but they'd been made to feel that they were letting people down if they admitted it in public. And it named a real frustration with modern working life that nobody was articulating well. The childcare is unaffordable. Workplaces haven't adapted. The mental load still falls disproportionately on the women, and they're still meant to be working full-time. And tradwife content didn't just solve any of that, really. But what it did say is, we see you. And when you feel something deeply and no one is naming it, the person who finally puts a label to that feeling that you're feeling feels like a friend. And obviously it was packaged in the most frictionless way possible. You've got the soft light, the slow mornings, the linen aprons, the farmhouse kitchens. It didn't really look like an ideology. It just looked like a vibe. People could consume it as aspirational content without realizing that they were actually being pulled into a belief system. So the aesthetic functioned as a wide funnel, and then the politics were deeper inside that funnel. And then the platforms did the rest, right? Every feminist response video, every outrage stitch, every journalist sharing a clip to critique it, all of those fed back into the algorithm, hungry for all of this controversy. And that signaled to those platforms that this content was worth watching. So the people who were finding it and commenting about it were inadvertently spreading it. And this is the part that I found the most interesting, is the real audience may not have been women after all. A 2024 New York Times opinion piece argued that Tradwife content functioned less as a lifestyle guide for women and more as a fantasy for men who want subservient wives, which, if you think about it, along the rise of the manosphere, makes complete sense. The Tradwife became the alpha male's perfect companion and the feminist's biggest energy all in one place. But the women consuming it weren't actually thinking about any of that consciously. They were just tired. They just saw something that looked like rest, and that just resonated with them. It clicked. That's the formula. You've got the right message, the right time, the right format. It's always the formula. So let's talk about the dangers, because I did bring that up. Financial dependence. When a woman is told, just depend on your guy financially, you'll be fine, that's the strongest risk factor for intimate partner violence and being unable to leave a relationship. So those young women who are fantasizing about that, they also had no idea what life looked like in the 1950s. So that's very concerning. And then the research found that Tradwife content regularly embedded extremist political messaging and conspiracy theories inside otherwise domestic, ordinary content. So wellness to ideology, there was just no clear line between those two. And the sad part is that the women most likely to be harmed were the ones that are most drawn to this content. So they were exhausted, looking for safety. And the Tradwife aesthetic promised exactly that. But what it sometimes delivered was the opposite. Look, I doubt Elena, the one who started this whole movement, expected any of this when she started doing her blog. And ironically, many of the women who built this movement, including her, made serious money from it. Make that make sense, all of the talking about you should lean on the man to make money, and they were like fucking rich. If you want something fun that actually grapples with all of this, check out Yesteryear by Caro Claire Burke. It's a novel about a Tradwife influencer who travels back in time to the brutal reality of farm life in 1805. Very satisfying, and links all of these questions and notes that I had together. Really cool book. More importantly, please tell a friend about the show. Let me know what you think, whether it's through our Instagram page, Why It Resonates Podcast, or in the comments on Spotify. Till then, from me, Lem, have a beautiful day or night wherever you are.